Let's look at the common controls for the whole patch that are found on the left and right of the edit window and in the footer on the bottom. Most of them are self-explanatory, but let's go through them. We have faders here to mix the levels of layer A and B together, and we can solo or mute them individually and pan them individually. And here we have some pitch controls. Now these knobs double for transpose and chorus transposition. Now the difference is transposed is used mainly to set intervals between the different layers. And it's the best quality. I'm going to command click to center it. Now when we're in coarse mode, what it does is it's modulatable, so I can sweep the pitch. Whereas transpose is just a static kind of transposition. So if you want to modulate it, use coarse mode. And here we have the controls for A and B. And then we have fine control for sense in between the semitones. Now here we have the part level for the whole part and a meter here to display the level, mute and solo, and this duplicates what's on the mixer page. Here we have layer A and B, and we can switch between them here, just like we can here. And we have a link button, and when this is on, what happens is when we adjust something, like for example, let's say the release envelope of the amplitude section here, it'll affect both layers equally, and that's something I modified in this little patch before I started. So link will change the parameter in both layers together, and when it's highlighted, it's on. Now we have the latch and trigger modes here. We've looked at these in live mode, and they basically work the same way. Latch mode will allow a note to be sustained until it's hit again. And then we have the various trigger modes that we've seen before, so we can set them here the same way, basically. We have a sustain pedal mode and an alternate sustain pedal mode. And here we can control the pitch bend up and down, how many semitones we want the pitch bend to affect the sound. We can control it separately for up and down. And here we have offsets for the entire patch. We have a gain offset that applies equally to both layers, and same thing for a transposition to transpose the entire patch. And here we set the polyphony for the patch, how many number of voices, and it can go up to 64. And here's where it gets interesting. I'm going to look at this in a moment, but here we have different velocity curves for the sensitivity of the keyboard and how you want it to respond to the velocities in the patch. And we even have a velocity zoom here if you want to go in and modify it in more detail. But I want to look at this in more detail now, the solo and glide functions. Now basically, solo turns this into a monophonic sounding synth. Let me turn these off, and I'll show you how it works. Now with it off, it's a regular polyphonic synth sound. We can get up to 8 voices now. And when I put solo on, it turns it into monophonic, meaning only one sound, one voice will sound at a time. So every time I hit a new note, it cuts off the original one. And I'm holding down the low note and then triggering other notes. Now when I have legato mode on, it affects how the additional notes are re-triggered. Right now, with this legato mode off, every time I hit a new note, it starts through the cycle of going through all the envelopes and LFOs. It starts from the beginning of each note. It's as if it's kind of like a note trigger mode, like when we looked at the trigger modes here. So we hear the full envelope, the full amp envelope of the sound and filter envelope of the sound each time a note is triggered. When legato mode is enabled here, it goes through the cycle regardless of when the new note is triggered until the sound decays. So it's kind of like all the envelopes and routings are running in free mode where it's not tied to the note on. So that's solo legato mode. Now glide is a kind of portamento effect where it allows the note to scoop up to the next pitch, and we set the amount of glide with this, and we can turn it on or off individually for each layer. So you hear how it kind of scoops up. We can adjust the amount there with that. Subtler amounts are a bit more effective. Now, the legato mode is interesting. Basically, with legato mode off, when you hit staccato notes, the interval is remembered, so you don't need to sustain a note in order for the portamento to work. So normally with portamento effects, you sustain the note and then you hit the next note and it scoops up to it. In this case, even if it's not sustained, Trillion will remember the pitch and scoop anyway. I'll show you. I'll play staccato notes and it'll still scoop up. Now with legato mode on, when you play staccato notes like that, the portamento effect is ignored. But when you're playing legato, it's remembered. but staccato. And this can greatly influence how a part sounds. Now, I've programmed up a little part with this, and I'm going to play it for you in this mode, and you'll hear when the notes are staccato, there's no portamento, and when they're sustained, we'll hear some subtle glides. Now, with this off, we'll hear every note being glided to. So a little bit better with it on. So that's a little overview of how this works. So those are the common controls. Stay tuned, and in the next videos, we'll be looking at some little tips and ideas of how to use all these tools we've looked at and create some musical patches and parts.